Hello dear crypto friends, and welcome to today's video in which I promise not to go crazy again, and I promise not to rant too much this time. Yesterday I had a bit of a bad day. Today everything is pretty fine again, and I will try to make a rational analysis of the crypto market. So let's start right away, as always, with our weekly Bitcoin chart. I switched to using the more, I would say, pessimistic long-term logarithmic channel because for the time being I have become a bit more pessimistic on Bitcoin, as you might have noticed in yesterday's video. It was very subtle but noticeable that my optimism is not super high right now, but maybe that is a good sign. And indeed today we got a bit of moving going on, but as we can see, it is still not managing to get through this resistance line with conviction. I mean, yeah, if we say that this here was an inverted head and shoulder, let me draw it again, right? I was saying this could form into an inverted head and shoulder pattern, and usually these patterns break out with strong conviction, and it would have gotten us to about 27,000 to the distance of the head to the neckline, again projected on top of the breakout point, so about 27,000. But as we can see, this is really not a breakout with conviction, and it barely managed to go above, friends. This is really not amazing. And the volume, let's not even talk about the volume. It is declining more and more. So what we would have wanted to see if this would have broken through is a breakout with high conviction, and we would have wanted to see a volume bar in that range here up high, on par with the highest volume bars. But what do we see? This is not happening, and it's even bouncing back. It's like it's broken through, like, do I really have to break through? I don't want to. And then breaks through and immediately falls back again. So that is really not the best of performances that we see here. But the hilarious thing is, friends, that if we now go to our good friend the stock market and we look at the Nasdaq, it is actually performing nicely today. It is performing nicely. The Nasdaq has been, as I said a few times, in a falling wedge structure, which is actually a bullish structure. Not only that, the Nasdaq has actually been printing a nice hidden bullish divergence with lower lows in the price, but higher lows in the RSI. So I was already speaking for quite a while that I was thinking some kind of bounce must come, because that was getting too ridiculous how oversold we are, just dropping without any bounce. And if now the Nasdaq continues pumping, and if we manage to go through this resistance line here, I am getting cautiously more optimistic that this could turn out to be a bit of a longer bounce, and with a bit of luck and the right economic circumstances, we might even stabilize and go back to all-time high levels. But of course, we cannot foresee that because, as I've said multiple times in previous videos, this will depend so much on what the Fed will be doing, how much they are going to tighten, how much are they still going to raise the interest rates, what will happen with Russia, Ukraine, what will happen with China. There are so many unknowns right now, so many crazy things that could happen that, friends, I'm really sorry, but nobody can foretell you right now what is going to happen in the near-term future. If this is really going to turn into a bounce, will it reach new all-time highs, or will it just be a bounce and we go lower, or will it not even break through? Will we get rejected here? Will we get rejected here like the last two times, and then we actually break lower here, and then actually we start going into a dump, right? This could also happen. This is not out of the question, because if we go to the S&P 500, the S&P 500 also is kind of making a hidden bullish divergence. We see also like lower lows here in the price and higher lows in the RSI, but it is not as strong as in the Nasdaq, and we don't really have a beautiful falling wedge structure. It is kind of like a falling channel, but it's not as beautiful as the Nasdaq. And the VIX, of course, speaks another language. Friends, if we look at the VIX says, unfortunately, that kind of a dump situation is not unlikely to happen, because if we look at the long-term VIX, we see that the VIX likes to do such resistance lines, right? And then every time when it breaks through such a resistance line, that means, of course, a brutal dump, because volatility spikes. I mean, the VIX is just the volatility of the S&P 500. Such a volatility spike always coincides, friends, with a dump. And we have again such a resistance line as we see here as in the last times. So we might now actually, if we just look at the VIX, we might just go now here again down to this level. So pumps normally coincide with drops in the VIX because they usually don't happen so fast. They are slower and thus more sustainable, and thus the volatility is not so high. But dumps happen, bam, very fast, phew, you know, and that is why actually we get these insane spikes in the VIX every time when there happens a larger dump. So what could happen now, of course, is that we go down again, retest the support, wobble around a few more times, and then bam, get a brutal dump. So that is, the VIX is saying that, friends, it is not clear what's going to happen, and we are not still decided if this will turn out to be a real bounce, because for a real bounce then the VIX would have to drop low, and then we would have to stay at low volatility for quite a while, right? Because then we would like a sustainable growth of the stock market. And if that would happen for the S&P 500, and we can assume that this would accordingly happen for the Nasdaq. So then we would of course like to see the Nasdaq grow, but Bitcoin doesn't seem to be following. What is going on with the Bitcoin? Hey Bitcoin, wake up, man. Huh? What is happening with you? Are you trying to disappoint us again? Are you trying to disappoint us again? So what could be happening with Bitcoin is a situation that we last had. The orange chart is Bitcoin. The candlestick chart is the Nasdaq, by the way. I see parallels or similarities to the situation in late 2018, in this dump, right? In the bear market of late 2018, early 2019, when we dumped down to 3,000 something. What happened back then is that the Nasdaq actually made a nice recovery. The Nasdaq didn't stay down very long. The Nasdaq actually recovered very fast and then went on and actually not long afterwards hit new all-time highs. But all this time, what did Bitcoin do? Let us just zoom in a bit more. All this time now, hilariously, Bitcoin just stayed around the 3,000 area. Look at this. Bitcoin just stayed here and the Nasdaq is climbing and climbing, and what is Bitcoin doing? It is just staying here in the 3,000 area. That is like an insane bear market type of behavior. So the Nasdaq started pumping, Bitcoin was doing nothing, and only then suddenly when the Nasdaq was almost again at the old all-time high, so after rising for like 3 months already, over 3 months, then in early April, Bitcoin started pumping. Bam! Bitcoin starts following only when the Nasdaq already is at almost all-time high levels, right here. So we could be looking at a quite similar situation. If this bounce now continues with a strong conviction, if this really turns out not to be just a dead cat bounce of the stock market and we go lower, because as I said, it could still happen that we really get a sustainable growth and that this actually unexpectedly continues going higher. It could happen. It's not out of the question. Of course, the economic circumstances need to be there for that to happen. That is clear, but it is not out of the question. So we can assume that Bitcoin would try to make us angry in that it just stays down and wobbles around here like a complete a-hole, like it did back in 2018, what I showed you before. And then when the Nasdaq hits the old all-time high level and is around here, almost at the old all-time high, then bam, suddenly Bitcoin would start going upwards very fast, very, very fast. I can imagine that something like this is about to happen again. And why? Well, because the market sentiment is just really bearish, and possibly there's also some manipulation going on. Friends, let's be realistic here. It is weird that Bitcoin is following the Nasdaq so nicely. I mean, if we overlay this on longer time frames, the Bitcoin is normally following the Nasdaq pretty nicely. And if we go into shorter time frames, this is especially apparent. Look at this. I mean, Bitcoin is basically sometimes an overlay of the Nasdaq. Here, for example, this is like to a ridiculous degree. I mean, Bitcoin is almost here, especially in that phase, a carbon copy of what the Nasdaq is doing. But now, let me zoom in what is happening now. What do we see, friends? Well, we see a huge divergence. Now suddenly the Nasdaq is going up, but Bitcoin is not going up. Bitcoin is just wobbling around and trying to break us. And it almost achieved it yesterday with me, as you might remember. So we see sometimes divergences happening, right? Let me go here in the 4-hour chart to other instances where we had divergences. Okay, in 2020, Bitcoin and the Nasdaq were highly correlated again. But for example, here, I mean, look, after the March 2020 low, the Nasdaq continued rising, right? Bitcoin rose with the Nasdaq, but then what? Going sideways, downish for a while? What is going on? All the while the Nasdaq rises, makes new all-time highs. Here also, for example, like in 2019, the Nasdaq was just all this time continuously rising. And what was Bitcoin doing? Even going down here, like to a local low. Even going down to this local low. So sometimes Bitcoin is nicely following the Nasdaq and sometimes not. And sometimes the correlation diverges for a while. But of course, it will be interesting to see when the correlation, if the Nasdaq pumps, when will the correlation be restored again? When will it be restored? And I have the suspicion that at some point it will bam, come back out of a sudden, out of nowhere. But I strongly suspect that Bitcoin wants to break us even more, because you know how Bitcoin is. It doesn't want to make it easy for us. No, no, it doesn't want to make it easy for us. Of course not. It wants, of course, to make us desperate, to make us really angry and go crazy. That's what Bitcoin really likes to do. So we could be looking, friends, at such a protracted bottom here like we had it in 2018. I'm really sorry to say this, but we really could be looking at such a situation. And I will just take this whole thing here because that is for me the worst case scenario, that we are basically now where we were in late 2018. And like we stay down here and the Nasdaq is already pumping and we stay down here, and only later do we follow. But then we get a second low and we could go even down again to really low levels as late as 2023, because let's remember the halving is only at some point in 2024. So it could even in 2023 still not perform nicely, and then only as late as 2024 would we go into the next rally, and then depending on when exactly we would get the next top, late 2024 to late 2025, somewhere in that range. So unfortunately, when I look at Bitcoin's behavior right now, it is not behaving bullish. It is really bearish. Even now when the Nasdaq and the S&P start pumping like crazy, it is not following. So that is not an amazing sign. I really hope that changes. But I suspect we could really be looking at such a situation here like in late 2018, early 2019. We could really be looking at such a situation. Even more so if we go into the monthly chart, this actually confirms it quite nicely. I have mentioned it yesterday. If we look at the monthly candles of now and late 2018, they look almost identical. I mean, look at them. These are almost identical monthly candle charts, and we could really be looking at a repeat or at something similar that we had back then. Something like this here. So that is my current picture, friends. I hope, of course, this will change. I really hope it will change and that we will follow the stock market soon again. But for the time being, Bitcoin really looks kind of bearish, I have to say. I will make daily updates on Bitcoin and the crypto market. If this changes, I certainly will let you know as soon as possible. I will make daily analysis of Bitcoin and the crypto market. It might happen that occasionally, like yesterday, I will be in a bad mood again and rant. Hey, this might happen sometimes. I will try to avoid it as best as I can, but I'm also only a human with emotions, so I will sometimes make rants if Bitcoin annoys me too much. But I hope this won't happen too often. Promised, this will not happen too often. So then, friends, thanks for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. I would be happy if you would subscribe to this channel. And as I said, I will make lots of analyses on Bitcoin, altcoins, the crypto market, and the correlation to the stock market. Have a nice day and see you in the next update tomorrow. Bye.